going to do is we're going to actually, yay, that's always good. Thank you for whoever's did that. So yeah, anaerobic and aerobic are two separate composting systems. Mostly when you're using just natural processes, i.e. browns and greens, and using water to produce your compost, anaerobic can be a bad situation. But if you control those microbes and you're creating an atmosphere of good bacteria, you can actually use it for an advantage. And the ones that I always look at are things like kimchi and sauerkraut and pickled onions. They're all processes that use good bacteria to create a good output. Now, aerobic, obviously, Mr. Motivator over there, aerobic is something that, that is a regular thing when it comes to composting. People understand that you need to move it around to create the air, to create heat, and then create decomposition. Now, when you look at these two systems, they don't seem very close to what this is, and this is cabbage. Now, cabbage is a good example of the difference between raw, cooked, and a fermentation system. Now, I'm going to be really rude, and we're going to talk about farting, because actually your a microbiome in your gut is very similar to a soil system and very similar to a composting system. So if you eat raw cabbage, which I have personally today, I've eaten some coleslaw. That process has some available nutrients, but a lot of roughage, a lot of fiber. If I cook it, then that process changes, because those microbes that are involved in that equation are going to start to change in composition. And if you look at the right-hand one, you can see sauerkraut. Now, all of them are the same product, but all have very different resources available to whoever consumes them. Now, out of all the three of them, the one that's going to make you fart more is actually going to be the cooked cabbage. And that's because you're starting to break down the composition of the cabbage in your before you even get to your guts, and your microbes are going to do the rest of the system for you. And sauerkraut has been something that has been around for hundreds of years. Fermentation is nothing new. We haven't reinvented the wheel or anything like that. All we've done is we've looked at it from a bigger picture and thought about what we can use in nature to retain and restore nutrients. Now, these are the two systems that we're talking about here. We're talking about anaerobic and aerobic. So on the left-hand side, this is a simple way of looking at a compost pile. You have organic matter, minerals, water, and microorganisms doing the work to do decomposition, i.e. make compost. So the black gold that everyone is used to seeing, but then you are losing water, heat, and carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide, CO2, is carbon and oxygen, and that's tons. With a Bokashi heap, you don't get that. So we're actually using the system of the microorganisms to try and retain those nutrients and retain that organic matter. So sometimes when I talk about Bokashi, and especially with people like the National Trust, where they're having a large amount of green waste that is going through their systems, Bokashi is not always the best way. And that's because you're retaining those nutrients, but you're also retaining the organic matter, i.e. 100 tons equals 90 tons. From an environmental impact, the obvious thing is that's a really good thing, but actually nature doesn't work like that anyway. There's a lot of diversity in nature, and actually aerobic and anaerobic are both good systems. And the way that I kind of talk about it is, think about a forest floor, and think about that leaf mulch that falls in at different parts of the year. If you pull that leaf mulch up and then look at the underside of it, you'll see lots of worms. But you also, if you smell it, it will smell very different to an aerobic system, and that's because that anaerobic system is happening in nature. So all we're trying to do really is mimic what you see in nature. So this is the difference. There's quite a difference in respects to composting versus Bokashi in respects to size. So depending on the organic matter will depend on massively what you're trying to achieve. From a farmer's point of view, we're doing a lot of work now with farmers, because what they want to do is they want to retain the nitrogen, which is the key bit for them to be able to spread it back onto the fields. And actually losing the amount of organic matter is something that they don't want to do. So having Bokashi as a system is quite an important part to their system of actually putting those nutrients back into the soil. Now, the key thing, and we before we started the call, we were talking about the coldness and etc. I'm actually for some reason my internet's not working today. I'm on a hotspot trying to do this presentation today. The cold affects all of us, but it also affects composting and microorganisms. Think about fermentation as not rotten, but retaining. Now, the great thing with fermentation is you don't need heat. So actually, Bokashi can work 365 days of the year. And for the conditions we're in at the moment, this is quite a good thing to be able to have this in the process. But also is speed. So microorganisms themselves are doing the work, but also you're not using heat, so you can use it all through the year. And we've done a lot of testing as a company. So we're now on a 10-year study when it comes to traditional compost versus Bokashi composting. So the figures you see on here, this was a test of leaf mulch. So actually, leaf mulch is a really nutrient-rich way of being able to get compost. And actually, at the end of the process, it's very quick. It's very easy, and actually the output the other side is excellent as a compost system. And the ones I want to kind of emphasize is that if you look at the starting material, this test was done on a like-for-like comparison, so 13.4 tons, and you'll see straight away the difference in the amount of kilograms that came back. Now, I normally, if I'm doing a presentation like this and I let people have a look at this in more detail, and the first thing people say to me straight away is, how come that Bokashi compost is more than the starter material? Well, that's because you're retaining water, but also you are adding things to it. So you do need things to add to the system to be able to do this. So the two products that we use are Actifirm, which is the microbes, and a thing called Aegea, which is seashell grit. Those are the two kind of catalysts for this process to work. But the big one is the carbon. Now, carbon has been now shown to give soil the ability to retain nutrients, but also retain moisture. So actually, if you think about it from a point of view of your soil, especially with the droughts that we had in the summer, the last couple of years in the summer, it is able to retain more of the nutrients, but it's also able to retain more of the moisture. So those carbon stores using the soil food web, if you've got root structures in the soil, those carbon stores can be utilized by the mycelium network and all the other networks in the soil food web to help plants to create natural resources for disease, etc. Now, NPK, and I hear this all the time, definitely from a farmer's point of view, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium seem to be the core thing when we're talking about anything to do with fertilizers. But actually, as a human, we don't just run on fats, carbohydrates, and proteins. We need micronutrients and we need minerals to be able to be for our microbiome, our gut to be able to process it. And it's the same with soil. So actually having nitrogen is good because that is obviously for the growth of the plants, but also having two types of nitrogen, which is mineral and organic nitrogen. One is like a McDonald's, but better quality in respects to the content. It's a fast food orientated, and then you've got organic nitrogen, which is like a slow release. So you've got the good quick fix and also the slow release as well. But there's been a lot of research recently on energy in soil. So if you haven't done it before, I would ask everyone to go out, maybe not today because it's a bit cold, go out, take your shoes and socks off, stick your feet on the ground, and actually feel the difference in yourself. So I've started doing grounding recently. There's loads of documents on grounding. The energy that's created by us and the energy that's created by the soil is actually a full circuit. And what we found in our research is that there is a lot more going on in those soils than just the NPK and the carbon, etc. There is lots of energy happening in that soil. So if we can put that energy back into the soil, just like we need energy, it will be able to then utilize that in the growing of the systems. So as I said, we've done a lot of testing with this. So these are the organic matter. So because you're not getting so much reduction in Bokashi generally, then you're getting more organic matter. More organic matter just means more nitrogen, more phosphorus, and more potassium anyway. So you are getting more available nutrients for the soil. And it's like we call it pre-digested food for the soil. So when you use it in the soil food web can easily digest it because we've started that process itself. And I use this as an example. If you are a non-meat eater, I apologize, but obviously I need to cater for all parties. When we're talking about available nutrients for Bokashi and for the soil, we're talking about the raw ingredients, i.e., the core things. The pills on the right hand side is unfortunately what modern society feels that we need to do. We just need to pop some pills and then we feel better. But unfortunately, that is only a part of that process. That texture and what's happening in the microbiome, your bacteria in your stomach are looking for that diversity. So is the soil. So if you just pump a load of I'm going to call them drugs, foliar fertilizers and granular fertilizers to a soil, then the food web can't digest it as well because it doesn't have very much to be able to process with it. Once scientists remember the we depend on plants. The rest of the processes will help to increase yield, but also the quality of the plants themselves. So I use this as an example. I love my beer. I'm a big beer drinker. If I just use water, yeast, and heat together, that's what creates the alcohol. It's not a very difficult process. But if I just left those as separate ingredients and didn't do anything with it, then nothing would happen. It wouldn't be a process of creating alcohol. The bacteria then makes the alcohol, um, and that then creates a fermentation process. Now, the unfortunate thing with beer, and I have found this personally myself, is that if you don't use the energy that's created from beer, then you do get a little bit larger. And this is where the conversation with inputs and versus outputs, the fermentation is a good way of retaining resources, but also you need to use them yourself. So it just makes things more available for everyone. And I use milk as an example because these two products are exactly the same in respects to raw material, but actually yogurt has more calories, so more energy than milk. And actually, it's very hard to get your head around. But the reason why there is because that milk is being created a bacterial process to create the yogurt. And in that process, those microorganisms have changed the structure of that milk to create more calories. So if you get to a yogurt stage and there's no more food for the bacteria, then it will stop that process. And then sugars and things like that can then accelerate that process. So when we get to yogurt, you've retained those nutrients, and also it helps with your gut biome as well. So think about it when you're talking about feeding your soil. Think about what does that soil need. Now, Bokashi itself is a way of storing nutrients. It is more energy in the soil, giving you better crops, but converts waste materials into resources. And there is a big thing about humus and what humus is, but the easiest way to describe it and how I talk to people is that if you stuck a spade into your soil and dug it up, the first sort of 2 to 3 inches, that's your humus. That's kind of your blanket for the microbes. And we forget sometimes, and especially in the weather like this, those poor little microbes in those soils. If you've got bare soils, they are freezing. They're not gonna do very much. And actually, if you think about it from a gardening point of view, you're not given any food to those microbes. You want in bare soil because that's what people tell you means it's a good soil. And then at some point in the source system, you're going to ask it to do some work. You're going to ask it to grow some plants. So if you don't feed those microbes for 9 months, they near enough starve. And then you then ask them to do some work. So actually, the microbes are really important, and there's no dig, no till. There's also cut and drop systems, and all these kind of systems will help with that process. But also, we need to think about that when we're doing our composting systems, and also thinking about how we're going to feed those soils. And there are ways of doing it. So, I hear a lot of people just saying, "Oh, it's all right. I'll go to my local farmer. I'll put some poo and some straw down, and that will give them some help." And actually, it does, it will help with that process. The problem is with this is that, especially, if you know your farmer, then you know what goes into the system, then great. If you don't, then the issue that you're always going to have is, are they using antibiotics? Are they, what kind of issues are you going to have with viruses and etc. that goes into the systems? So another way of doing it is to use Bokashi. So Bokashi is a Japanese word for fermented organic matter. That's what Bokashi stands for from Japan. It's anaerobic decomposition, and it's all about creating nutrient-dense, pre-digested food for the soil. We say like compost, but only better. It's not a compost. So actually, you do need a process to happen with the soil food web. So worms, nematodes, etc., to break down that organic matter. So a lot of people say to me when they do this process, yeah, I'm sold, I want to do this, and they come to me and they go, Martyn, it doesn't work. And what they're seeing is their cabbage leaves that they put in 12 weeks later look like cabbage leaves. Well, that's because it's a fermentation process, just like a pickled onion. A pickled onion in a jar will look like a pickled onion in 1 year and even in 10 years' time. But if you took that 10-year-old pickled onion out, just like to say, I love a really mature pickled onion. The first thing you'll do is if you squished it, there'll be no structure left in it. And actually, that's what worms and rest of the soil food web want. They want to be able to twist it as easy as possible, um, and as quick as possible. So this is our biggest problem, and what I hear mostly when people talk about Bokashi as a system. What it's known for more than anything else in the whole of the world is food waste. We are and how much waste has been they're doing because it's normally out of sight, out of mind. And I speak to a lot of councils who say to me, the issue that we have is culture. Culture is just I don't need to worry about it. It's out of the way. But actually, this becomes quite a really good resource if you can process it properly. Now, the things that you need though is and that will then create the soil that you want. Now, there are lots of manufacturers of Bokashi brown out there. We are, as a company, we are certified by a group called EMRO. EMRO are the ones that kind of made the system to be able to do the Bokashi system. So there are lots of DIY systems available for Bokashi. If you do some Google searching, and we as a company, we can point in the right direction for this. It is not that you can't do this DIY. So you can make your own bran. We give you the tools to be able to do that. You can even make it from nature, but it's the hassle factor more than anything else. We, as a manufacturer, we obviously produce a large amount of this on a regular basis, but also what you find with bran and a bucket, I hear more people saying it doesn't work And the two things I ask them is one, have you got a good bucket? Is it got a sealed lid and is it not letting any oxygen in? And two, what is the brand doing? Now, I learned something this week which kind of blew my mind, and I love my job because every day is a learning day. And I always wondered why I thought I was using enough bran. I'm actually using too much, and we'll go into that in a moment. So we've done some side-by-side comparisons with other manufacturers of bran, and actually using our brand, you can use a lot less, like a lot less of the system. And actually, if you've got a good bucket and a good bucket working, you will see some white mold happening on the side. And I have been told, although I haven't tried it myself, and I am trying it at the moment, in theory, if you've got that mold structure, you're balancing out those good bacteria from the bad bacteria. And actually, that white mold is the process that you need for Bokashi to work. And actually, you don't need to put any more brown in. You can continue on with that process without even putting any brown in. So the good thing with Bokashi is you can put everything into it. So meat, fish, cooked, uncooked, bones, you name it, it can go into the system. And that's what people like about it, is that you can put everything into the system. Remember though, what you put in equals what you put out. So if you put a potato in there and 2 weeks later, it will still be a potato. So we always recommend doing sort of 5 centimeter chunks. So when you're cutting your veg, etc., you can then obviously reduce it down the size. Try and keep away from moldy items. Now, there is always, people say to me, well, I've got a punnet of strawberries. I've got one or two. That's fine. Now, one or two you can get away with, but don't put things that are completely starting to rot. It's all about this balance with microbes and how they work. So if you've got bad bacteria in that system and you can't outweigh it with good bacteria, then you will just get a bad experience with the bucket. And trust me, you do not want a Bokashi bucket to go bad because it does smell awful. But actually, the process is really simple. So all you're going to do is you're going to take your food waste, you're going to cut it up to small chunks. You're going to sprinkle a tiny bit of bran, and we'll go over how much you actually need in the process. And then you make sure that you squish it down, and that's another key thing because you want to make it as anaerobic as possible. And then you're going to close the lid. And every time you do it, you're just going to keep layering it up until you fill the bucket. I would always recommend 2 buckets because what you need to do is you need to ferment that food waste for 2 weeks afterwards. And the second bucket gives you an opportunity to then start the second bucket. I love this more than anything else because it shows me how much I actually waste. It's a bit of a game in our house of like how little I can put into this bucket. But actually think about it from a monetary value. This is money. This is money you're putting back into the system. So it's nice to be able to see these and actually see it as a monetary value. Now, when people say, well, what can you do with afters? Remember, all these pictures show it as food waste. So the first way and the way that you probably see it in most advertising is you dig yourself a trench after 2 weeks of fermentation and you put that food waste directly into the soil. After 4 to 5 weeks, you can dig that up and you won't see anything in that system. The soil food web absolutely loves it, and especially worms. Now, there's definitely a myth out there that worms don't like low pH because this is what the process is. It's a low pH process. Well, I can tell you now in America, they do a lot of this in wormeries and vermicomposting, and they Bokashi the food waste first for the worms to be able to process it more efficiently. Remember, it's full of nutrients, so actually the worms work exactly the same. They've got a microbiome in their guts as well. So actually to help them in that process, it's a really good way of doing it. If you haven't got garden, you can make yourself a little soil factory. So I've got into a habit now of all my old potting soil, etc. I put into a big container. So I put 2/3 soil, 1/3 food waste, and I literally just layer it in a system, leave it again for a couple of weeks, and that will then regenerate the soil. Or you can put it into your compost heap. Now, the only thing with compost heaps, and when it comes to obviously food waste, yes, there's going to be issues with rats, and whatever you say, rats will find food and etc. They don't really like it. It's very low pH, so it's very acidic. But they will go and have a look for it. So if you're not turning your aerobic system, very often, then I wouldn't suggest doing it. But the key thing is that if you put Bokashi into an aerobic system, it is what we call a new word for everyone who doesn't know this, facultative. So the microorganisms we actually use are working both anaerobic and aerobic. So they can work with oxygen or without oxygen. So if you put food waste into a system where you're using aeration, it will spike the temperature up very quickly, and it will keep that temperature up for a longer period of time. So if you've got a dormant compost heap and you want to give it a little bit of a boost, stick some Bokashi food waste into it. Now, I did some maths today, and I've actually blown my own mind when it comes to these figures. So I always thought, and I've used them for like 3 years. I always thought you needed loads of bran. And actually, we've done some really comprehensive analysis on this. For a 16-litre bucket, which is normally what you see in the marketplace, you only need 30 grams of Bokashi bran, which is less than 1p a litre. The reason why I know this is that we're working with a council at the moment, and they're trying to find a way of storing food waste. And we came up with a system to be able to do this. And they asked her obviously how much it was going to cost. If you got a good quality bran, that's how much you need. So if you're looking at a 1 ton amount, you only need less than 2 kilos of Bokashi bran. We've got tests that we can show you with this. It's quite amazing at what the bacteria does. Now, I can only talk for my brand in respects to our products. There are obviously other brand manufacturers out there, and they will need to quote what they feel is right. We have batch codes on all our products. We have comprehensive testing. We have labs, etc., and we've invested a lot of money into doing this testing. So it's really nice to be able to do this, because actually, if you think about it from a fertilizer point of view, for a 16-litre bucket, it's going to cost you 16p for 16 litres of fertilizer. I don't know of anything else on the market that's cheap to be able to give you that kind of a return. The only other thing you've got is time. The good thing is with time, with Bokashi with food waste, it's 2 weeks for fermentation, about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the microbial activity and worms, etc., in the soil. So actually, a good value for money product. Just make sure you see that logo. You will see it not just from us, but there are going to be other manufacturers, other suppliers of bran out there on the market who buy our brand, who are reselling it, who will be using this EM logo. So yeah, always look for that logo. So, just a word of warning. And again, this is from personal experience. I've done some testing myself. This is a DIY Bokashi bucket system. Now, just going to give you a bit of a warning with this. This is not me saying it doesn't work full stop, because it does. And I can get it to work. The only reason why I'm saying this is not a great system is that the bucket inside a bucket, so you're kind of making your own Bokashi system, it needs to be anaerobic, so it needs to have no oxygen. There is quite a lot of oxygen that comes around that system. And the three things I found difficult with this system myself when I trialed it to see what it was: one, you have to use a lot of bran. So rule of thumb with food waste is if you use more bran, you're going to get less smell. So it's not that this doesn't work, you just need to use more bran, but also you need to make sure that the seals around the lid and around the bucket in the bucket is sealed, and it's a good seal on there. That will then create less oxygen, which will then create less smell. So just a word of warning more than anything else. It's not that it doesn't work, it just obviously is a bit more money to be able to have to spend the brand side. Again, using EM certified product, not going to have so many issues. The great thing with food waste, though, and this is what we're working with the councils, is this can be scaled up really easily. So as a company, we sell 16 litre and 120 litres, which are the green buckets in the middle. But we're now doing fish tubs, which are these ones that I'm showing you on the screen. These are 1 ton, so 870 kilos at a time with Bokashi food waste. And the reason why the council are really interested in this, in theory, as long as there's no oxygen going to it, these can stay in those fish tubs for indefinitely. If they can ferment for as long as they like. The only but is you're gonna have a lot of liquid in the bottom, so you will need to drain the liquid on a regular basis. But apart from that, you can stay in those tubs for as long as you like. Now, if there's any councils on the call today, there is a value in food waste. Now, normally with when it comes to food waste, you are using putrefaction, using rotting, and you're putting that food waste that's been probably sat in their aerobic system with nothing really happening to it, rotting away for 2 weeks, and then it gets dumped into anaerobic digesters. We've done some testing, and we're actually working with Reading University at the moment, Aberystwyth, and we are doing some comprehensive tests on AD plants. These figures that I'm showing you here are to do with maize. So we actually Bokashi some maize before it went to an anaerobic digester. It created 23% increase in gas production. So actually it created more energy using the Bokashi process. So actually storing, and this is why the councils are now really interested in this system, storing it in Bokashi and then pumping it into an anaerobic digester means that we can actually create more gas production. And then that obviously creates a retaining of the nutrients. We don't know at the moment what happens the other side with anaerobic digestate. That's something we're testing at the moment. We can't say that it's going to create more microbial activity or anything like that because the microbes are used in the gas production. But again, something to bear in mind when we all need electricity. Obviously, on a call, need electricity to live. Now, we talked about food waste. This is one that people know, but actually green waste is becoming more and more popular. And Bokashi system, we've got quite a few now, a few national trusts, English heritage places, using green mulch Bokashi systems. So it's actually quite a simple system. So you're taking your greens and browns. The sweet spot is 20:1 carbon to nitrogen ratio, but you can Bokashi green waste anything. So I'll show you some examples later on. And I love when people say to me, well, what should I put into it? And I just say, just try anything and just dump it in, see what happens. Because I can always give you an answer of why it did work or didn't work, but actually we've had some really good results with it. But all you're doing is you're creating a layering system. This is a no turn system. So you don't need to turn it, you don't need to create heat. It's literally like a lasagna. So you're just putting organic matter, whatever that is, your grass cuttings, your chip-ins, leaf mulch, etc. And then you're putting the amendments. The amendments that you need to use are a gear, which is seashell grit, and that's to do with the pH in the system, and then Actifirm, which is to do with the microbes that actually create the process. Now, this is how we used to do it. So it needs to be an anaerobic system. So we need to keep as much oxygen as we can out of it. So this is my colleague Andrew, who did a pile in Birmingham, and all he's doing, as you can see, he's not mixing out an equal amounts or anything like that. He's literally dumping some green waste into a plastic sheet. He's putting the Actifirm and the gear on, and he's just repeating it as a lasagna. And then you're going to cover it for 6 to 8 weeks. Now, this is Chatsworth, and Chatsworth have now gone one step further, and I love this. This is a really good idea. I'm not Sophie and Chatsworth. This is, definitely the one who asked me this question. I said, "Oh, just try it." So these are Bokashi piles in situ, and what they've used straw and some paper, shredded up paper from the offices to create its own little microbiome. So actually, instead of using plastic, which we don't, we need to cover these systems because they need to be anaerobic. Actually, what they've done is they've used it as a little cover, just like a thatched roof. I'm still waiting for results. As you can see, this is in the frost, so this was done in December. But she just wanted to have a trial and see what she felt and the way it worked. But I know this works. I've done this personally myself, and I think it's a really good way of being able to again retain those nutrients, not have to move it, anything like that. Also, Daleks. Now, Daleks work. If you haven't watched Nikki, and I'm going to point to Nikki, if you have not watched Nikki Scott's video on a Dalek, do a Google search, find Dr. Compost, and show and see an actual Dalek working properly. They're really easy to do, but people sometimes find this very difficult to understand. As long as you get the greens and browns and you get some aerating in it, you get some moisture in there, they work actually really well. And they're black, so they keep the heat really well. This is a Bokashi system. So what you see here is a Dalek, which was everything. I mean, this was hamster bedding, bit of green waste, etc. And what you see on the right hand side is the output the other side. Now that is 8 weeks to get to that process, and it creates amazing green mulch on the top of the beddings, and then the soil food web will do the rest of the work. And it's a nice way of keeping those microbes going, but also from a Dalek point of view, there's no turn, no, you just pile it in there, leave it, and then that's the output you get the other side. And you can go big. So these are the fish tubs that we've used for food waste. This is using green mulch. If you want to do a little Google search, this is Josh Sparks. He's based in North Devon, in a place called Wolseley, and he's doing a regenerative farm at the moment and looking at other systems. And again, he's using Bokashi as a part of a green mulch system and having a big container like that. So these are your bits you need. So gear is to do with the seashell grit. That's to do with pH. So composting systems need a balance of pH. Actiferm as a product is our microorganisms, but it has a low pH. So you need to add the gear to that. So just to make you aware, these prices are done on 1 ton from us as a retail price. But actually, this is one. So for 1 ton of material, you need 2 litres of Actiferm and 10 kilos of the gear. So this is a price per kilo. So you're looking at 50p per kilo for green waste. Now, the one here, the optional Edisol, we do sell an amendment called Edisol, which is clay minerals. Really good. Got to be honest, quite expensive. If you want to kind of pimp it up and get some premium nutrients, clay is really good to absorb that moisture, but also to retain those nutrients, and can create a better system. So again, super affordable as a system and retaining those nutrients. But there are other ways. So these are some other systems. So the one on the left, the hybrid system, is actually an anaerobic and aerobic system. So similar to, if you have heard of a Johnson Sioux system, this is very similar to a Johnson Sioux system. This is still a layering system. It's still a no turn system, but you normally put pipes in there to create some oxygen. The one in the middle, I'm really excited about. This is actually up in Scotland. This is seaweed being Bokashi. So the seaweed has gone through a process. That's 6 weeks to get to that point, which I'm still blown away by. So that was 6 weeks, and that is a super rich nitrogen-based product, which is going to create some really good mulch on the top, but also farmyard manure. So as a company, we're not just talking about the health of the soil, especially when it comes to animals. We're looking at the health of the animals as well. So using Actiferm, which is the microbes in a barn, will suppress disease pressure to actually help the welfare of the animals. Good bacteria is brought into the system, but also it will retain those nutrients. So actually, the Bokashi system can be used in a lot of ways that that you probably haven't seen before on anything that you've seen on the internet. Now, where did it all begin? Really simply, there's a guy called Dr. Heger, Professor Heger, who developed a microorganism system. Now, I'm going to do the salesman spiel because, again, this is what I've been told. I would love to meet Heger. He's an amazing guy. But my story that I've been told was he was looking at different kinds of bacteria. He stuck them all together. He chucked them on some grass, and the grass was greener on the other side. Now, I mean, it sounds like a salesman spiel, but there is a bit of science in that. And the thing is with microorganisms and the product that we use, EM, if you've got bad soil, politely doing anything to it will help a process. It's not really to do with like a miracle, or was going to say a brand, then a miracle system that does it. You got to remember, if you've got a really poor soil, anything you do to it will help that microorganisms. And all we do really is we just create a nice blanket for those microorganisms to be able to develop. So yeah, if you want any more research on EM, have a look at the EMRO website, and it goes into a bit more detail. And that's the certifications you want to look for. And we are the authorized distributor in the UK for that product, and we're part of a European system and also a worldwide system. So themselves, we use lactic acid bacteria, yeast, fungi, phototropic bacteria, They're the key ones that we use in the system. They all work in harmony with each other. They all have their own purposes. If you go to agriton.co.uk, we've got a really good explanation of what they do as individuals. So these are all available in nature. So you can make this yourself. But obviously trying to harvest these things is quite difficult. So we've just done that as a process for you. But as I said, we are a company that try and reduce the amount that we import because these products are imported from the Netherlands. So we sell a product called EM1. So EM1 is what we call the mother. So it actually has its own microorganisms as like a base, like a starter. So if you buy EM1 from us and add some sugarcane molasses and stick them in a fermenter, in 7 days, you'll get your own brew of EM. So if you want to get even cheaper than just buying Actifirm as a ready-made product, we will give you the tools and we'll give you resources to be able to do this. So we try and make it as easy as possible to make it as a DIY option. Now, you'll be amazed the difference some bacteria can make in your garden. If you can get that bacteria working and that fungi working, you'll be amazed what you get. Things like the benefits of these microorganisms themselves are not just for the soil, but for the plants, increasing nutrients availability, making your vegetables taste like vegetables. I mean, microorganisms are a good part of why a carrot tastes more like a carrot if it's grown yourself, giving you healthier plants, reducing plant disease, but it works immediately. So Bokashi, as soon as it goes to the soil system, it starts working immediately because the microbes will react with the soil structure to help it working. It has long-term benefits. So we're not just talking about a quick fix. And I use a tomato growing bag as an example. My wife has been growing tomatoes in grow bags for as well, we've been together 22 years, until recently. And she always wondered why she couldn't plant anything else into a tomato bag. Well, that's because tomatoes are probably the highest ones for nutrient content. But that's the key thing, is that we want to be able to utilize the soil in the future. So if we feed the soil and feed the microbes, then you can feed yourself. Better water retention. So, if we've got large areas that you want some more water retention, more carbon equals more water retention. But it's a natural process. And that's the key thing. We're not trying to put chemicals back into the system and use it as human. We're trying to use nature in its own way. But improving the growth rates of these plants are also important because we want to get the yields. So remember, these are systems that can be scaled from home gardens all the way up to to horticultural systems. So think about it. When you're doing your composting next, do you want to reduce harmful emissions, retain more nutrients, and increase your organic matter, and create your own organic fertilizer and feed the soil? So think about those microorganisms that are doing all the work for you and trying to make you into healthier people and smiling, happy people. That's what they're there for. So these just to give you an idea, obviously how we are as a company. We're not just based in the UK. We're actually part of a big group. So we have loads of research and development over the country. So we don't just say these things. We have a lot of research and science behind it. For anyone that joined on later on in the call, I've put a link to my massive share file. So there's quite a few people on this call who know me. I'm all about sharing education. I don't know everything, and I'm one of those people that puts my hands up. I'm going to have a look at the questions in a minute, and if I don't know, I will definitely find out for you. But it's really important that we share this information. So if you haven't seen the link in the chat, please have a look. And thank you for your time. So let's have a quick look at the questions and see what ones I can answer. So as I said, the link is in the chat. Let's have a look. Where did you get the carbon map from? So the carbon map is from good question. Hold on 2 seconds. Let me just have a look at my notes. I'll stop sharing my screen. While I'm looking at that, I'll answer that question in a minute. So the carbon map I can put in the chat in a sec. These are all this information is available on that shared link as well. Oh, yeah, good carbon place. Someone's already answered that question, which is nice. Thank you. Is the bran inoculated or ordinary wheat bran? No, it is inoculated. It's inoculated with the affected microorganisms. Thanks, Nikki. The liquid that comes off after 2 weeks, is that immediately usable as a liquid feed? Right. So it is based with lactic acid bacteria. It's super potent. So the council that we're working with is actually in London. We are looking to use that liquid to be able to get rid of the fatbergs that are in the sewers. So actually, the microorganisms that are based in that liquid are a really good drain cleaner. But actually, they can be used as a foliar fertilizer as well. You do need to dilute it though, so it's a 1 to 100 ratio. As long as you keep it in an airtight seal container, you can keep it for sort of 2 to 3 months. So if you can't use it all at once, remember, depending on what you put into it will depend on what that looks like. So if you are quite a high vegetable diet, you're going to have probably 70 to 80% water. So you're going to have a lot of water coming out the bottom. If it's more meat and fish, then you're not going to have as much. Seaweed Bokashi looks amazing. Yeah, so that was a project in Scotland who we're working where they had some real issue the the storms that they've been having, so they've been able to use it. Is there a difference in microdiversity between normal composting and Bokashi? Yes, 100%. The reason being is that actually composting itself as a system, the key thing with any composting is the maturation, i.e., just leaving it. So if you want the best, and I'm going to call it biocomplete compost, aerobic composting can be really good with microorganisms and fungi activity, but you just need it to rest. You need it to mature to be able to get that microbe activity. Bokashi is different because you're already putting those microbes into that system. So it's kind of cheating a little bit because you're already putting those microbes into that system. So it depends how long you leave a compost for. If you're leaving it for a longer period of time, so some of the Johnson Sue systems, you're looking at sort of 12 months. Yeah, you will get more fungi activity because there's less movement on there. And it's really important when you're talking about fungi and bacteria ratios, don't get too hung up with it because there's a lot of science out there, but just think about what you're going to grow in it. If you're growing, a tree needs more fungi compared to a crop that needs more bacteria. And there's loads of pictures out there on the internet to show the kind of difference of what fungi and bacteria you need. So depending on what you're doing. Has Agriton done any research around soil obesity? Does adding lots of Bokashi material? Yeah, so the problem is with soil generally, just like us, you can't just keep pumping stuff into it and expecting miracles. There gets to a point where the soil structure just can't take any more. So depending on the organic matter will depend on how much you can put into it. We normally use a system with food waste of 1/3 food waste to 2/3 soil, to give you kind of an example. If you're using farmyard manure, obviously it depends on the content. Again, just have a chat with us and tell us what the content is, and we can work it out for you. Are you supposed to have white fur around the sides? Yes, white fur is good. It's actually a good way of seeing a bucket. If you've seen blue or green, that's where you're going to have problems. And you'll probably smell it before you see it, to be honest. So yeah, just have a look when you're looking at food waste. Do you add a little bit of bran every time or add food to the bucket or just one application at the start? Do you know what? It's a good question. From my point of view of using it, yes, layering is the right way of doing it. But I also have I'm part of a group called the Mycelium Network, and these are dedicated local composters that have started using Bokashi as part of their systems for aerobic systems. All they do is they put one layer at the bottom and one layer at the top, and actually it works. So as long as that microbe activity is working, that white fuzz you see on there, then actually you can get away with it. But I would always recommend just to do it in a layering system anyway. How do we know the soil web love it? Is it just because we see lots of it being eaten? Just thinking, I eat lots of stuff, but it isn't always good for me. Yeah, it's a good question. So soil health generally is firstly, as humans, we don't know the whole story. Like there's a lot of that soil structure that we're still investigating and still learning about. But the thing is with when it comes to how the soul food web love it, you will always see a clump of worms around the Bokashi food waste. Like, and that's one thing I always look at. Worms will find their natural resources that they can digest quickly and efficiently. And it does show that, obviously that they do like it. The worms themselves, obviously, the more active they are, the more they reproduce. The more they reproduce, the more of them there are. So therefore, yeah, you can see that they're not just enjoying it because it's fast food, but they're enjoying it to be able to be productive as well. So yeah, that's definitely a thing. Like rounds of roots of garlic, lots of nutrients there. Yeah, no, very true. Yeah, there's obviously lots of nutrients around that. Is there anyone that wants to jump on and take over the mic and ask a question?
Hi, Martin. Connor here. The hot spotting from the middle of a snowstorm. I'm afraid my home network's down, so I'm out in the van here. I just wanted to say I thought that was really, really good and clear explanation of everything that's going on with the Bokashi there. And I'm so glad you told me that about the the amount of the concentration of the liquid that's coming off that. I had no idea it was that concentrated. And I thought diluting it at about 10 to 1 was sufficient. So
Yeah,
I might have been doing
I
it damage.
So the in respects to damage, so actually just to make you aware, if you want to be, it's probably not the people on this call that that would actually buy this product. We actually have a thing called Bokashi Soil Improver. So we take apple pulp, Bokashi, and straw, and we create our own Bokashi. So if you don't even want to do Bokashi's system, we actually make a pre-made version of it called Bokashi Soil Improver. I've personally used it myself, and there's two things I would say about it. One is a low pH. If you want to use it as a weed killer, it's brilliant. I mean, it literally burns the weeds. And straight away, people then go, "Whoa, hold on, you want to put that into the soil?" It's only an instant thing. So for pH is quite an important part, and actually the liquid that comes off the Bokashi bin is a very low pH. But actually it's lactic acid bacteria based. In that process of the microorganisms working with phototrophic and yeast, the lab will be the most concentrated in that system. The problem is they don't have a food source. So therefore, if you don't use it quickly enough in an aerobic system, then you're going to have some smells, and it won't do anything in respect of the process. I had, and I've got to be honest, someone said to me on a call, "Oh, well, I use it to revitalize my Bokashi bin," and when they said that to me, I was like, okay, and they would obviously been using it and it'd been working fine. Actually, it wasn't the Bokashi liquid that was doing the work. It was probably the mold that was in the Bokashi bin anyway. So actually, there are bins, and in Japan, they only use it really as a Kickstarter because they have that microbial activity. It's like a yeast starter, really. It's very similar to a starter when you're doing sourdough. If you can keep that process working all the time in a good system, in theory, you wouldn't even need the Bokashi brand at all. But obviously, it depends on what food sources you put into it. So yeah, just be careful with the liquid. It's not that it's bad. It's obviously just highly potent.
Thanks for that.
Is there anyone else with any questions at all?
I think that was me that did that. Was
It
saying
was you,
it's a
yes,
good way
Nicky.
of doing it. And I actually got that from a woman who was teaching at Schumacher who'd been doing it there. So she told me. But that's
And do you know
interesting.
what? And the reason why I said this, because I knew it was you, Nicky, but I wasn't gonna say it was you. When you said it to
So,
me, I was like, okay. And I took it as like face value. I was like, but actually, what in that system, that's right, because actually probably the Bokashi bin it created its own microbiome and it was working really well. So
yeah.
actually, giving it a bit of liquid just kind of kick-started microbes. Because remember, microbes don't have legs, so they need a bit of liquid to move around in. So actually, it would have been a bit to do with the liquid because it was a liquid, but also the lab would have just kind of kick-started it going again. So yeah, if you've got a healthy Bokashi bucket, you know, in Japan they don't put very much inoculant at all with it. They just keep that system running all the time.
Well, she was actually soaking sort of waste paper in the liquid and then drying it out on a washing line and then using that paper torn up to be a replacement for the bran.
Okay.
That's how she was doing it, yeah.
And this is a thing with always systems. Always interested, and you know, especially with these kind of systems. Now I will definitely talk to you afterwards because I'd
Yeah.
love to do it as a little bit of a trial and we can do some testing ourselves in our lab. But, I haven't there is another system which I haven't spoken about, which is Bokashi, which is coffee waste made into Bokashi bran. And last year I did quite a big thing with it with my Sydney network and people I spoke to, and people were, oh, you can use coffee grinds to make Bokashi a system. The problem is with all these kind of systems is consistency to get the results of what people want. So it's not that they don't work. But coffee is a good example, using coffee waste, inoculation it to make your own Bokashi brand. Your same system as you were saying, Nikki, with you know, using newspaper and then it becoming a system. We have to just make sure as a company that we get that kind of continuity. So if someone does have an issue, they come back to us and we're happy to test the brand to begin with. And also if there's any education that we can help with, you know, obviously we'll be able to do that. The problem is with nature, as we know, and you know, if I'm running on my hotspot at the moment, nature will always win with these kind of things. So sometimes if the conditions aren't right, etc., then obviously it won't work. But if the conditions are right, then they will work. So yeah, we're just trying to take that little bit of guesswork out of the systems.
Sure, sure. Great. Well, it's
Any other
really
questions?
fascinating stuff. Tess, you had
The
one.
chat from Tess yet?
Oh, yeah, sorry. So Tess has put so it's better not to clean out the Bokashi containers when you empty them. Do you know what? I agree. Yeah, actually, no, don't clean them out. So if you having white mold in there and it's not smelling, politely don't. And this is what makes me laugh when we're talking about bacteria generally. Bacteria is bad. Full stop. This is what I hear all the time. So we sell as a company, we sell lactic acid bacteria cleaning spray. And I try and explain to people that you have a microbiome on your skin, but also you have a microbiome on your surfaces. So we as a society in humans, we have become too clean. And it's all about the dominance. So if you clean, as in antibacterial cleaning, and you kill 99.9% of bacteria, if you've got bad bacteria, they dominate a lot quicker than good bacteria do anyway. So actually having a super clean, and hospitals are a good example of that. You have to clean regularly because it always has to be clean because you're not having that microbiome, that kind of film on the top to create that layer. You don't see many ill farms, let's put it this way. I mean, they obviously have their hands in soil on a regular basis and they're creating their own microbiomes. And I try not to get too scared with bacteria because, you know, I deal with them on a regular basis. So things like cleaning out your bucket, if I can look at a bucket, and fair enough, I've got some experience with these things, so I know what I'm looking for. But if it doesn't smell bad, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be all right. It's when the bad smell, and the bad smell is putrefaction. That's when the rotting kind of sets into it. So yeah, if you shouldn't, you should never clean a Bokashi bucket really with antibacterial because the system is bacteria, and now you're trying to kill them, and they're trying to help you. So yeah, never clean it with antibacterial stuff.
That's brilliant.
Any other questions? No. No, all good. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciated. If anyone has any other questions at all, my name is Martyn Richards. I'm on all socials, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Find agriton.co.uk and get in contact with us if you need any more information.
Great. Thank you,
Thank
Martyn.
you.
Good.
Thank you so much, Martin.
Thanks.
Yeah, Martyn, I just want to say, I think on behalf of all of us, thank you very much for that. That was very, very interesting. And I must admit, I tried Bokashi lots of years ago, and it didn't work. So but obviously I got some cheapo stuff and did a lot of do it yourself.